They drew the map, every line, every detour, every dead end dressed up as an opportunity. They constructed a future you were never meant to own, just occupy. A cog, a pawn, a background character who was supposed to follow the script written by people who never saw the fire in your eyes, only the silence in your compliance. They knew where you'd walk, how you'd respond, who you'd love, what you'd chase. They even timed the fall they hoped you'd never question. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, a grand design made from their insecurities, dressed up as architecture. They didn't plan for resistance. They planned for obedience. But what they didn't know is that the quiet one, the agreeable one, was not asleep. That soul was studying, and studying leads to revolt. You didn't react. That's what made it legendary. You moved. While they watched for emotion, you strategized. While they tried to bait your instinct, you taught it discipline. Your ascent wasn't chaos, it was clockwork. And that's what destroyed them. Because nothing shatters a rigged game like a player who refuses to play. You didn't attack the structure. You simply walked out of it. And the moment you did, their castle collapsed under its own illusion. You didn't need to dismantle their rules. You rewrote the whole language. And when systems built on predictability face originality, they tremble. You didn't shout. You didn't burn it down. You changed the axis of their control with one decision: to stop being who they needed you to be. They built it all like a fortress, not to protect you, but to trap you inside the illusion of progress. Promotions that were prisons, compliments that were chains, relationships that resembled reward systems, not connections. Every step forward came with a whisper: good, stay here, don't question it. But beneath your skin, something ancient kept whispering back, something that remembered what freedom feels like. And that whisper grew, became thought, became movement, until one day, you looked at the entire design they so carefully planned and said, not anymore. That was the fracture point. And from that point forward, history rewrote itself on your terms. They didn't panic at first. That's the mistake people make when they overestimate control. They assume the system is too big to fail. They didn't see your absence as a threat, until your silence became signal, until your move started shifting others. The moment one pawn wakes up, the whole board begins to blur. People started asking questions, peering behind the curtain. They looked at your walkout not as rebellion, but as permission. Permission to refuse. Permission to reroute. And suddenly, the game was no longer theirs to manage. The ripple had become a tide. The tide became a flood, all from one move. One unpredictable, irreversible move. You didn't just step out. You built something else. And that's the part they couldn't fathom. See, they anticipated rebellion. They had responses ready for anger. They could handle noise. But creation? That terrifies them. Because once you build your own structure, their approval becomes irrelevant. Once you become your own source, their authority turns to dust. You didn't destroy them, you made them obsolete. And the difference is critical, because destruction feeds ego. Obsolescence feeds legacy. And when future eyes study your steps, they won't see a reaction. They'll see a blueprint. They told themselves you were lucky, that your move was impulsive, that it would collapse eventually. They whispered this lie over and over, hoping it would drown out the sound of their empire rusting in real time. But you kept building. Not faster, not louder, just smarter. Every brick of your reality placed with intention. Every silence layered with foresight. You didn't need to shout. Your existence became the argument. Your success became the testimony. And each time they looked up and saw you still standing, they had to confront the one thing they tried to avoid, that the future no longer included their fingerprints. You walk differently now, not out of arrogance, but because you carry something they tried to bury: clarity. You see systems now. You see the architecture behind smiles, the psychology behind compliments, the strategy behind every staged breakdown. They thought you'd stay confused. They counted on it. But clarity sharpens the soul. You no longer react. You decide. And every decision you make now echoes back through time, rewriting the meaning of what they tried to make final. They thought they ended your chapter, but they were just a comma. You turned the page, and the story that followed was unrecognizable to them. They talk about you now, but only in fragments. They never mention the plan, just the fallout. They pretend it was all sudden, that no one saw it coming. But you did. You always saw it. You just didn't let them know you did. And that restraint, that was the final dagger, because true disruption doesn't announce itself. It arrives. And when it arrives wearing your name, your silence, your fire, it doesn't need to explain. It just ends what was never meant to survive you. They built the structure with your silence in mind. Every beam of that house of control was held together by your fear of being misunderstood, your fear of disappointing, your fear of being seen as difficult. That was their blueprint. Compliance disguised as connection. Obedience framed as loyalty. They taught you that peace was earned by self-erasure, that to be accepted, you had to become predictable. And you did, for a while. You followed the rhythm. You shrank on cue. You played the role to such perfection, they mistook your performance for nature. But what they didn't account for was the soul beneath the silence, the mind behind the mask. They never prepared for the day you'd wake up, not as a victim, but as a force. Your obedience was never about weakness. It was about hope. The hope that if you gave enough, proved enough, quieted yourself enough, you'd finally be seen. That someone would recognize your effort and return it. But they didn't. They got comfortable in the echo of your surrender. They relied on it, built their confidence on it. Until one morning, you looked around and saw it all for what it was. Not safety, but containment. In that moment, that was the awakening. The slow, brutal realization that you weren't being loved. You were being used. You weren't being valued. You were being managed. And when that truth hit your bloodstream, it didn't cause collapse. It caused combustion. They didn't hear the shift at first, because awakening is not loud. It's cellular. It begins in the spine, a tingle, a stiffening. Then it moves to the breath, a longer inhale, a refusal to sigh. Then the eyes sharpen, the body straightens, and soon the language changes. You no longer say, "It's okay." You say, "That's not acceptable." You no longer explain. You decide. And when they noticed this change, their first instinct was to fix it. Reboot you. Reinstall the obedience. But the system no longer supported their program. You had updated. And now, their tactics crash upon entry. They thought the awakening would be explosive. Tears, arguments, ultimatums. But it wasn't. It was quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. Because obedience has noise. It pleads. It performs. It rationalizes. Awakening? It observes. It unplugs. It acts. No announcement. No negotiation. Just departure. And when you stopped justifying your boundaries, stopped bending your standards, stopped shrinking to preserve their comfort, They lost their grip, not because you fought, but because you left. Left the emotional economy where they were the banker and you were the borrower. Left the plantation of guilt where your worth was harvested through sacrifice. Left the belief that love must be earned through obedience. You walked off their stage, and silence became your standing ovation. They still try to reach you through the same broken doorways, with language built on the memory of your old patterns. You're being too much. You've changed. Why can't you just... But those spells no longer work. You no longer run programs that require validation to execute. You're not defiant. You're clear. You're not angry. You're awake. They counted on you mistaking control for care, but your eyes are open now. And once you see the puppet strings, you can't unsee them. You don't cut them in rage. You let them rot in your absence. And when the strings fall, so does their entire illusion. They speak about your transformation like it came from nowhere. They call it dramatic, sudden, but you know better. It was gradual. 1,000 betrayals, 1,000 silent corrections, 1,000 swallowed truths that curdled in your throat. You just didn't show it. You endured and endured, until endurance turned into excavation, until the self buried beneath the obedience began to claw its way out. They never saw the war inside you. They just saw the day you stopped answering their summons. And when they looked into your eyes expecting the old rhythm, all they found was stillness. And that stillness was final. You're not looking for revenge. That's what they don't understand. You don't want to make them feel what you felt. You just want distance. You want truth. You want the taste of your own voice without the aftertaste of apology. You want mornings where you don't flinch at your phone. You want conversations that don't end with you questioning your sanity. That's the hunger now. Not to prove them wrong, but to feel right in your own skin. And every step you take in that direction tears another brick from the temple of obedience they tried to keep you praying in. Your awakening isn't polished. It's not poetic. It's raw, violent, disorienting, like waking up mid-surgery. You question everything, yourself most of all. But then the fog clears, the shaking stops, and you realize you've survived.